Welcome to the Global Solutions Talk. I'm Paul Nemitz. I'm a fellow of the Global Solutions Initiative and I'm a law professor at the College of Europe. I speak today with Udbhav Tiwari of Signal, the messenger. And Udbhav had positions at Google and Mozilla previously. Udbhav, democracy and technology. How does Signal fit in there? What are your numbers of users compared to other messengers?
So Signal as an application is quite unique in that it's actually a non-profit open source project where all of the claims that are made about the project are publicly verifiable. We are one of the very few applications that are very widely used that don't just open source the client code, which is the version of the code that's running on your application, whether mobile or desktop, but also the server-side code of what's actually running in the background at Signal, performing the service that you do. And in that regard, what Signal is the gold standard of end-to-end encryption. So today, approximately 3.5 billion people in the world use the Signal protocol, which is the underlying technology that performs end-to-end encryption within Signal and is licensed to other players as well, most prominently WhatsApp. But Signal is different from WhatsApp because Signal doesn't just deploy the Signal protocol for protecting the content of messages, but also the metadata that is associated with messages. So as an example, if you place a call with someone on Signal, Signal doesn't have a record of that call taking place. It only knows that these two accounts communicated with each other, not even whether it was a phone call or not. Whereas on WhatsApp and other messengers, you can actually find out metadata if you are a government and make a request to an organization. So we view ourselves as an organization that provides encryption and privacy as a fundamental right that should be available to everyone.
What are your plans for future expansion? And would a general obligation of interoperability between messengers to arrive at a system like email, where really everybody can communicate with everybody, be something which is useful in your space?
Thank you. We definitely have plans of expansion. Over the just this year alone, we were the top app on iOS and Android in the Netherlands, in Belgium. We were in the top 3 in Italy. We were very briefly in the top 5 in the United States. So it's very clear that as an application, the need for what Signal is providing, which is private communications, is more than ever. And we are seeing that in our numbers as well. But when it comes to interoperability, it's actually a conversation that's very strong in Europe because of the Digital Markets Act, which in fact contains obligations that large dominant players need to offer interoperability to smaller players if the smaller players want it. And Signal's been quite unequivocal in that we don't want to participate in that ecosystem because we will not be able to make the privacy guarantees that we make with regard to end-to-end encrypted messaging with interoperability. A simple example is metadata. In the earlier example I gave you of how if you place a phone call on Signal, Signal doesn't know the fact that that phone call took place or has a log of it. With interoperability, we would have to provide that information to the other service. Imagine I'm calling you on WhatsApp. I have to tell WhatsApp, I would like to place a phone call to this number. And when that happens, WhatsApp knows the number, Signal knows the number, and their interoperation is taking place. So that means that in a world in which protecting metadata, profile name, profile images, profile information, group membership, group information are all things that are invisible to Signal as a service. And we simply cannot provide those services while interoperating with others because of the fact that the metadata required to do so will be leaked to third-party services. However, if you look at the proposal that WhatsApp has put out as a part of interoperability under the Digital Markets Act, that interoperation proposal is also actually based on the Signal protocol, which means today, if you are another messenger, not Signal, and you want to interoperate with WhatsApp, you actually can, but you can only do so by deploying the Signal protocol on your end as well, because that is the gold standard for security and privacy that WhatsApp has endorsed in that case and the Commission has accepted.
Let's continue on this theme for a moment. So you would say an obligation of interoperability would also have to provide the obligation to do the interoperability on the level of protection of privacy, which is the highest of the two players or in this multilateral environment. So this is what you would require to be able to participate in interoperability.
Absolutely. And from what we've seen of all of the technical solutions today, There are no ways to interoperate across services without sharing the identifier on the basis of which you want to interoperate. It's almost like saying, I want to send a parcel to another country, but that I will write the address in a way that only I can understand and the other country does not. It will mean that once it goes to the other country, no one will be able to see who it's supposed to go to. And that is the information, that metadata is what Signal protects.
Let's turn to the political environment, the Trump government and US politics. How do they influence your operations? I know that Meredith Whittaker, your president, moved to Paris already a year before the US elections because she had this instinct and said, we have to move out of the US. Have you moved your operations and your financing out of the US? How has the Trump election impacted your operations?
So far, Signal as an organization is still very much based in the United States. We are a nonprofit set up as a foundation, and then that foundation also has another entity underneath it that operates, hires the engineers, and maintains the open source project. That has not moved out of the United States. And the primary reason we believe that the politics in the United States don't necessarily affect us too much is that we don't rely on our word for the promises that we make to our consumers and to society. Every single change that takes place on Signal is also reflected in an open source repository that can be viewed and verified by everyone. Which means that the reason people use Signal, which is the gold standard for end-to-end encryption, is one in which the politics of the situation don't impact how that service is deployed, how it is being updated. We have recently rolled out post-quantum cryptography as well in order to resist upcoming cyber attacks that could possibly involve quantum computers. And all of this is done by a project that is fundamentally global. We are very aware that there are many countries in Europe, like I mentioned earlier, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, where we have done very well too. And we have a very vocal community that engages with the open source project, both on the Signal forums as well as on GitHub. If you see the bits where we launched username privacy last year and the conversations that take place there, it becomes pretty clear that as a project, because it's open source, it's also global. And that means anybody can contribute to it and decide what the future of the project will be, but shepherded and stewarded by Signal as an organization. So we don't imagine that changing. We think that privacy is either for everyone or for no one. And as a part of that fundamental right to privacy, end-to-end encryption is one of the bedrock that we have of community organizing, of communications, and just of existing as human beings in the digital age.
Tell me, under US law, the US government can force providers to provide content access and at the same time oblige providers not to speak about this. This is called the gagging order. So how can the community be sure that you are not subject to an order obliging you to provide access and imposing a gagging order on you, which means you cannot speak about it?
Because the code that runs Signal is open source. If there were to be a gag order upon Signal, the way that Signal would resist it is by not collecting the data in the first place. Gag orders can force you to share information that you have and not tell anyone else. But what sets Signal apart is that we actually have a website, signal.org/bigbrother. And on that website, you'll actually see multiple gag orders that we have received from courts and law enforcement agencies that we have contested and managed to get the court to unseal the gag orders and then put them up for the world to see. And when you open those reports, you'll actually see there are 3 pieces of information we can share. Whether you have an account or not, the date on which your account was created, and the timestamp at which your account last connected to the service. Those are the only 3 pieces of metadata that Signal has. And the verification for this is also what we've provided to courts and gotten those orders unsealed. So our promises rely on transparency and the public believing in what we do. In code, we do that on GitHub, being open source. And in law, we do that by transparency of actually releasing the gag orders and showing how that metadata is a fraction of what every other messenger collects.
WhatsApp and other big messengers are now offering AI conversations as an add-on. Is that something you could envisage, or is there any other add-on to messaging which you are looking at with your capacities to build networks for democracy?
When it comes to AI, our president, Meredith Whittaker, and Signal has been quite clear that a lot of the way that AI is being deployed on devices today is magical thinking. It makes you believe that it can do certain things, and a lot of them are actually quite risky for privacy and encryption. For example, both in Europe and in the UK, one of the most hotly contested debates in encryption in the last 5 years has been client-side scanning, which is this idea that your device will scan the content before it becomes encrypted on the application. We literally think that that is thought police, because your device will be listening to what you're doing, and if you meet certain criteria, then will report on you before it ends up being encrypted. That's an example of the kind of service that AI will be used to perform in operating systems, because it's AI that will scan the images, AI that will probabilistically determine if something is problematic or not. So we've cautioned against it, and we think that a lot of the hype around AI agents may seem like it's an attempt to put your brain in a jar and connect it into communications, and suddenly it's doing things on your behalf. But the risks around that, the data they know about you, the places that data will be stored, whether it can even be performed in an end-to-end encrypted manner, are all very open questions. We've seen WhatsApp announce very recently private processing, which was its ability to perform AI operations on messages, but on the cloud in a private way that even Meta can't see. We already think there are many differences there as well.
Thank you, Udbhav. Good to have you and good to have Signal in the world. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.